Welcome everybody, this is Edgardo Balentine.
And this is Scott DiGregorio, and welcome to the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast, where we're going to discuss the rapidly changing landscape of the real estate industry.
And the steps that you need to take today in order to survive tomorrow.
Look, I'm going to give you the perspective of a 25-year veteran, somebody who has been there and done that.
With Jesus life for all fart, okay?
Screw you, man.
Look, I'm going to give you a fresh perspective from somebody that's applying those steps today.
So that basically means you're young and you don't know shit.
All right, let's get this started. All right, everybody, welcome to the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast. This is Edgardo Balentine, and I'm here with my co-host,
Scott DiGregorio. What is going on, my man?
What's going on, man? So, listen, today's topic, it's really cool. It's how to get new people into the business, or how to train new people into the business.
You know, it's funny, man. I know I've said this to you from the day I met you, because you were new when we met. And I've spent years telling people the way to grow a business is bringing in new people and training them. And it's always, no, it's too complicated. There's too much involved. And I just never believed that. And that's the first thing. The second thing that was very interesting to me is when I thought about it, I thought, you know what? 1 out of 20 is going to make it. And I know we'll get into more details as we go, but the success of this has been pretty astronomical.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning a couple things. Yes, we've been successful in the people that we've hiring, and we've learned through it. At the same time, in the past 6 months, the market shifted, right? And I think this was the real...
I noticed.
Yeah, I think this was the real test of whether it was successful or not, right? Because succeeding in this market and succeeding in 2021, it's two completely different
Facts.
things. So I think this opens up the conversation of what things we should be aware of that we're afraid of doing when we hire new people, what things we shouldn't be aware of. But then also what this market did, and dude, you've been super helpful about this, is being very conscious of who you bring into your team. Not from the lens of are they new or not, but from the lens of what qualifications or what qualities do they need to have for them to join the team. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, it's one of the things that's been very interesting and kind of fun for me is, you know, I think of Tori on my team. Right, he started work for me. He was 23. He was fresh. He was in college trying to get his, I don't know, like his CSI degree, whatever the heck that's called. And what's interesting is when you bring in somebody that raw and that young, they don't know what they'll be good at.
Right.
So, you look for the untrainable things, right? It's the first thing I look for. Number one, work ethic. Can't train work ethic. Number one, caring, right?
Number two.
Can't get, number two, actually, no, those are both number one. Freudian slip maybe,
Yeah.
But they need to be able to care. Like, you can't teach those things. You also need somebody that's very trainable, okay? Like, one of the things I love to do is, and I firmly believe nobody should be hired without having a DISC assessment done. And we'll talk about that.
What's a DISC assessment?
Okay. So a DISC assessment, the first job I ever got, or first sales job I ever got, I was selling copy machines door to door for Toshiba. And I remember I was a kid, and I remember I had to fill out this questionnaire with a bunch of stupid questions. And it was many, many years later before I realized what it was. So a DISC assessment is a personality assessment. And what it does is it, through a series of very benign questions, and I think the report's $80 or something like that you pay for, but through a series of very benign questions, it analyzes what you're good at, what you're bad at, how you like to communicate, how you don't like to communicate, how you act in stressful situations at a freakishly accurate level. And in my experience, after having used these for, decades, is that it very accurately points out the negatives. This person tends to get defensive when challenged, or this person shuts down when challenged, or what have you. And one of the tricks I've always used is I tell the prospect, do me a favor, fill this out, read the report, and when you send it back to me, I want you to give me some feedback on its accuracy. And what I look for is if they own the negative feedback, we're good. If they push back on everything negative, there's no set of circumstances we'll hire them.
There you
Because
go.
that's an untrainable person.
If you want to come work for us, that's a little tip right there.
There we go.
Just to interject there. One thing that you make me do when I became a manager was to take the DISC assessment as a manager too.
Yes.
Which is a whole other thing, right?
Whole
Because
different thing.
one thing is you just as an employee or just as a, somebody that works for somebody, which is an employee. And another thing is how you manage and the type of compatibilities that you're going to have with the DISC assessment. So that's cool. So tip number 1 from this episode, don't oversee the DISC assessment. I know a lot of people want to just say, well, I don't believe in personality tests. This is not just your typical Facebook personality or what character of friends you are. This is a real test that it's going to tell you not just, and it's not a thing that it just tells you, yes, I should hire this person or not, but it also tells you what's the best way to interact with this person when the person gets upset, when the person is happy, what's the best way to motivate them. So it's a great thing to have. It's $80 very well spent.
Yeah, I also love, it tells you the best way to praise somebody. Do they want public or private praising? Are they
money hungry? Are they?
Yeah. And by the way, to the people that are thinking, I don't believe in personality tests, every single one of the Fortune 500 companies use DISC, or, there's 2 or 3 of them that are popular, like Hobie Test, another one, use some sort of assessment test.
Right.
And it's not a thing where they're going to give the answers at once, because the questions are too benign. It's just not a thing. So, okay, so that's the first thing.
All right,
okay?
So first tip, DISC assessment.
Yes,
okay, keep
all right,
going.
because that's going to give me insight into the things that they don't know. After that, when they come on board, bro, I just start throwing tasks at them, right? In our world, right? Are they good on the phone? Here's 100 real estate agents. Call them up and invite them to my next class. How do they do? Hey, let me...
What problem solving does that create, right? Like, how do they do? I'll give you an example, right?
Yep.
I just hired a kid, young. On his 3rd day, I said exactly that. Just make 100 calls in this area of the country and see if they can come to the class. And I said, I think a good idea is to go to social media and see who's posting houses around this area. And after 20 minutes...
that was it?
That was it. Go. After 20 minutes, I came to him and I asked him how it was going. And he's like, I don't think this was the most efficient way to do it. After I made 20 calls, that it didn't really quite work out because a lot of people were not in that area. So what I did is I went to the real estate... The board of real estate, the association of real estate in that area. And then I went and I only called the people that had the area code from that area, and everybody that I'm calling, it's in that area.
Smart.
It shows problem solving, and it shows that they can take the task and run with it.
Right. And again, those are the things you can't teach, right? The X's and O's of real estate or mortgage, the basics, I'm sorry, they're just not complicated.
Okay, so that's another great tip. Throw things at them. Now, let me ask you something, Scott. You've been in the business for a very, very long time, so I assume that at least, maybe not you, but your avatar has more walls when it comes to hiring a new person, right? I was new 6 years ago. It's still very fresh in my head, me coming into the business. So to me, it's a lot easier to put myself in their position and go, this is how I did it. This is how I did it just 5 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever, because I'm much younger than you. So, because of my success in the short amount of time, I can tell them this is what you need to do and let's do it. What are the fears that you had when you started hiring new people? Which fears were truthful and which fears were it just didn't happen?
Look, I mean, it's funny you say that, right? I'm going to push back on you. It's funny that we're doing this in a recording instead of just hanging out, having a beer. But, dude, when you came on board 6 years ago, I gave you my business plan, and which I had been using for 20 years, and you implemented it, and it worked. So, yes, things are different now, right?
For a different reason, on the tail end of you telling our manager to fire me. That's a story for another episode.
But, now I remember you came to me with some social media idea. I don't remember what it was. Right. And I remember looking at you going, I have no idea what you just said, but run with it.
Right.
But anyway, look, so, I think the biggest fear, I'll tell you what the biggest fear is that everybody has to get rid of. They can't do it as well as I can. Okay, number one. Number two, it's going to take me just as long. It's going to take me longer to teach them how to do it than to do it myself. I'll address the second one first. Yes, you're correct. For the first one or two, or if they're not that quick of a learner, 3 times. From times 4 through infinity, you'll never have to do it again. Okay? And touching on the first one, bro, before we started recording, we were just having this conversation about our business. You're correct. Okay? If you're a super high achiever, I do not hire somebody and expect them to be another me. All right? If I hire somebody that's another me, like you become a competitor of mine. Okay?
Right.
Now we're partners and it didn't work out that way, but for a while we were competitors.
We can only have so many partners.
Yeah. So, I think realistically, the question you have to ask yourself is 2 or 3 people operating at 80% of you more successful than you operating at 100% of yourself? And the honest answer is yes.
Yeah.
To that. Every single time the honest answer is yes. So, I think a lot of the fears is more internal than external. I would say though that you have to be ready to fire quick.
Okay. Yeah. I like what we use at Neo, which is, let people in from a really tiny door and then have like the back door wide open for anybody that just doesn't fit. I think that's a Gary Vee thing, right? Like hire quick and fire quicker.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to do, whether it's new people or not. But since the episode is about hiring specifically new people, one thing that I did with most of the new guys that I hired and worked out to be great is I spent, and obviously it depends on the position, but when you hire somebody that's never been in the business, you get a blank canvas, right? They have no bad habits, and they only know the business the way that you do the business. So one of the things that I did is I basically paid them to shadow me for a month.
Oh, sure.
Where they were just literally shadowing me. To the point where now a lot of people that get on the phone with Anthony think they're talking to me.
Right.
Or a lot of people go like, Anthony, I never know if I'm talking to Anthony, if I'm talking to you, because you guys sound the same. And that's a compliment to me, right? It's a compliment because I'm thinking like, okay, somehow I was able to duplicate myself, which is ideal.
Right. To a person who's not old enough to legally order a beer yet.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's worth mentioning. And look, the other thing is this, okay? It's all about, and this is maybe the biggest tip. We've had a lot of number one tips in this episode so far. But it's all about the prep work, okay? I had assistants for years. And then I went to hire an assistant, and I had my my first coach, Coach Bob, who was with me for, over a decade. And this is the process he took me through. And look, if you want to do this successfully, you got to put in some work. I mean, this is not a thing where somebody comes in and you go, here, do these 20 things. Like to win with this. So what he had me do was he had me write down everything I did for 2 weeks. And what I meant by that was at 2:17, I start working on tax returns. And at 2:31, the phone rings. And I write down 2:17, work on taxes, 2:31, client call. And then let's say that's 10 minutes long, 2:41, back to working on taxes. So every time I switched directions, I wrote down what I was doing. And at the end of the week, or the end of the 2 weeks, we tallied up how much time I spent on each task. And then he said, okay, Scott, if you want to hire somebody, what tasks are they going to do? And I said, this, and this. And he said, okay, that's 4.5 hours a week, just work harder. And I'm like, well, I want them. He goes, okay, find more things to give them. And we spent a fair amount of time crafting out realistically what does 32 hours a week look like? Because then you have 8 hours of just, crap happens, right? Because it's such a reactive business. But doing that prep work up front before you do anything is really important. Understanding disc profiles to the point where okay, like this person should be a DI, right? Or an SI or whatever. And then you have your avatar built, you have your job description built, and now it's a lot easier to get it right.
Right. And then on the back end of that, I think it's important to say, what once they get in, having a lot of recorded stuff, a lot of game film, it's crucial. So, for example, if you have a new person that doesn't know how to work with your CRM, instead of just hiring somebody that's used to your CRM, have a lot of videos of you going through how to do things through the CRM. It's a pain in the butt, I get it, but you only do it once. And once you do it that one time, you can just send that video. For the person that's in training, it's a lot easier because they can put the screen and look at the video over and over again. And then for the next hire and the next hire and the next hire, that video can be evergreen. That's one thing. And then the other thing is game film. Record yourself making the cold calls if you're a cold calling realtor. Record yourself having a conversation at an open house if you're one of those realtors that do conversation at an open house. Record yourself if you can doing a listing presentation. Because two things are going to happen. One, you're going to realize what it takes to actually do it while being watched. Because it's very different to do it when you're not being watched and where you're just going through the motions. But when you feel that you're on stage, I don't care if you're new or if you've done it forever, when you feel like you're on stage, it's a different ballgame. And if you hire somebody new and you ask them to record their conversations and to do all of those things, they are on stage. So be willing to give what you're asking them to do. And then the second thing is it allows them to study and to see your wins and most importantly, your losses, right?
Sure.
Like we were just talking before we got on camera. I'm a big believer in us recording everything we're doing, posting it to our staff, and making comments on it. If we shit the bed, if we did terrible, if we were rushed, if we were faced with maybe a scenario that we're not used to, if it's the first time that somebody, I don't know, dies in the middle of a meeting, it's a great recording to have because it goes, hey, I didn't do a good job on this. I wish I could have done this. A lot of times the losses it's a huge opportunity for the whole team to learn. So another great tip is make sure that you have a lot of recordings on how to do things and a lot of recordings on you doing things.
Yeah, now let me throw something else here that I think is critically important. When you're bringing in somebody new, one of the things that's very important is for them to have a very thorough understanding of what success looks like for them.
Yes.
Okay? What does winning mean? So you need to make sure that, like, hey, make these 200 calls. I know you did this, but make these calls to agents. And what I'd like to see is 10 RSVPs. Okay? And, what I always look to do is I look to do the activity myself, record my own numbers, and then hold them to, at the beginning, probably a 50% success rate. So if I got 20 appointments, I'll hold them to 10, and then eventually to a 70 or maybe 80% success rate. Okay, never do I expect them to achieve the results I'm going to achieve. But I think it's really important to lay out for them what is success, and then have regular meetings where you're actually discussing their numbers and their progress. And you're talking about problem solving and things of that nature. So there needs to be a mountain of communication on this through this whole thing. Now, wait, I want to ask you a question.
Wait, before I want to comment on that.
Okay.
And this is a little off topic, but it's worth commenting because it's something that we learned, or it was definitely drilled in when we went to Amplify by Rene Rodriguez. Which, by the way, if you don't know who this is, just listen to the episode that we did with him.
He's a beast.
It's the influence objective. This is the first time because it's the first new person that I have since we went to Amplify, that when I asked him to make the calls, I told him, hey, we need to have every single conversation that we have with a client, an agent, a financial advisor, a divorce attorney. We need to walk into the conversation with a very clear and defined influence objective. What we want to do in this call is influence them to do X. And that is the win or loss if we are able to achieve this thing. And the specific thing with the influence objective, which we kind of like rediscover and amplify, is it needs to be something not only very clear, but very simple. A lot of times we go, oh, I just want to create a relationship with somebody, or oh, I just want to create a partnership with somebody. That is not a clear influence objective
What the hell
because
does that mean?
nobody knows what that means. Or it can mean even worse. It can mean something completely different to you than it can mean to me.
Right.
To me, creating a relationship might be created a business relationship, which means you're going to send me deals and I'm going to give you value. To you, it might be we're going to become best friends.
Right.
And if that's what you think and that's what I'm thinking, guess what? We're going to clash. So it's super important to, while you're saying, tell them what a win and a loss is, but also tell them what the objective is in coming into or saying the script
of
or
each individual task.
Of every task.
Of every
exactly.
communication, yeah. Okay, now, one of the things that, and we've never talked about this off camera, but one of the things that crosses my mind is the difference in our age. So I feel like, pros and cons, I don't know which one's easier. I feel like bringing in a 20 or 25-year-old kid to come work for me is very simple because I'm so well established and I'm older and I've been around the block and blah, blah, blah. You obviously don't have that. Do you feel, but on the other end, you're maybe more relatable, right?
Sure.
Do you feel one's better than the other? I mean, obviously we've both made it work, right? So we're not saying that one doesn't work and one does, but what are your thoughts on that?
You know, the short answer is I don't think it matters at the end of the day. When I became a manager, I was very self-conscious about my young age as a manager, and I was very self-conscious about hiring people older than me.
Which was most of the population.
Which was most of the people, and 100% of the people that worked for me at the time. So it made me uncomfortable, which made it uncomfortable. The fact that it made me a little uncomfortable and weird, and my thought process of maybe they feel it's weird. The truth is, and now looking back, and now in my decision to hire or not hire is, it doesn't matter. You know, some people come with an experience that's good or that's bad. Young people come with less experience, but it might be a good thing. It might be a bad thing. I feel like at the end of the day, whether you hire a 20-year-old or I hire a 20-year-old, yes, I might be more relatable because I'm closer to the age and you may not, but at the same time, they might feel more immediate respect for you than they might feel for me. It's just, we just need to be willing to have all of the conversations.
It's very individualized.
Well, not just individualized, but we need to be willing to have all of the conversations. Like I, at my younger age, if I hire somebody that's much older than me, I need to establish immediately, I'm the boss. I don't care how old you are. This is how things work at my branch. At the same time, me hiring somebody younger than me that's, you know, on their phone and maybe taking it way too lackadaisical, I need to be able to say, hey, this is the place of business. This is not how we work, you know? So I just feel like we just need to be willing to have conversations. And this is the thing. When you start managing, you put all these obstacles in your head. But the truth is, it's just as hard to hire a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 20-year-old.
Sure.
It's different obstacles that you face, but it's all the same.
All right, now here's a pro tip. Okay, if anybody is not a big business book reader, get the audiobook. My favorite business book is the E-Myth Revisited, written by a guy named Michael Gerber. And the letter E in the title of that book stands for entrepreneurial, right? So it's the entrepreneurial myth. And here is the entrepreneurial myth. The entrepreneurial myth says, I'm a good electrician, therefore I'm going to be good at running an electrical contracting company. I'm a good doctor, therefore I'm going to be good at running a medical office. I'm a good real estate agent, therefore I'm going to be good at running a team. Please appreciate the fact that management is a different industry.
It is.
Okay? It is a totally different industry than whatever your job function is before you go into management. All right? Because I would say that managing a mortgage company and managing a real estate company and managing most other companies, yeah, there's a technical piece to every individual business. But besides that, managing is managing because it's people, it's interpersonal relationships, it's all that stuff. So, I would start off here, if you're thinking about doing this, really asking yourself the question, would I be good at managing? there's an adage like, oh, it's all babysitting. Like, no, it doesn't have to be all babysitting, but it's some.
But let me push back on that. It's not will I be good at management, but am I willing to put in the time to become good at management? Because
Sure.
you can be good at management. It's just a muscle that you need to develop. Just like if you were, before you became a fucking electrician or a fucking realtor, you were not a good realtor or a good electrician. It's just you put in the time and you became better. I am a better manager today than I was when I started, and you are a better manager today than you were when I started.
Sure. 100% right. And, the other thing that's interesting, so we were in Mastermind a few years ago, and this was like a turning point in my branch. And
Tim Brahim,
man, which in the mortgage world, he's a legend. And, the question was asked, how do I stop my team from coming to me with every little question and getting them to just make their own decisions?
You asked the question.
Yeah.
The question was asked
by
you.
And he said, Scott, how long you in the business? And I told him, he goes, how many mistakes did you make?
No, you're ruining the
story. Am I screwing up the story?
You're ruining the story.
All right, run with the story.
I told you, Scott, let me tell you something. I was where you were. And I made the bold decision because I was getting tired with the business. And I was just hating the business at that point. It was putting a strain in my family. It was tough. And my family told me, we need to get away. And I made the decision to go to Costa Rica for 8 weeks. And I left to Costa Rica to the forest, to the jungle, where there wasn't any internet or anything. And I told my team, you guys have to deal with everything. And he left to Costa Rica. And when he came back from Costa Rica, he was expecting to hear nothing but disasters and horror stories and losing all the partners that he had. And instead, when he came back, he told you, when I came back, I realized that they told me there were some problems and we were going to call you. But we dealt with everything. Everything's okay. Not only that, but we were able to close, X amount of loans, which was even more than before he left. Now, he jokingly says, jokingly or not, I don't know, Tim will have to tell us. He said that he immediately turned around, told his wife to book another 6 months in Costa Rica, and then he went to Costa Rica. But the point of the story is, the biggest takeaway was he allowed them, he gave them permission to make mistakes and to fix their own mistakes.
Absolutely.
You were going to fuck up that story
I was.
bad.
But, part of that
Shout out to Costa Rica.
Yeah. But part of that conversation was that, like, how many mistakes did you make? How much money did you lose? How many relationships did you burn? Have you told your team that you're okay with them going through that same process? Because that is the process. So make sure you're creating a safe space, and not in the way that's thrown around nowadays, a safe space in the context of letting them know, you're okay if you make a mistake. Because when they're coming to you for everything, it's because they're afraid of getting in trouble for screwing up, which, by the way, would be outlined in the disc profile. So, bro, those are some good tips.
That's it. Guys, take it, leave it, and please, I would love to hear horror stories or success stories on hiring new people.
The horror stories are funnier.
The horror stories are much funnier, but success stories of hiring new people into the industry and how that worked out or didn't work out. Once again, this is the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast, where we ask you one question.
Are you doing what you need to do today to be successful tomorrow?
Peace.
See you in 2 weeks.
Well, thank you guys for listening. And now it's your turn to implement everything you learned today.
Look, you have a question, you have a topic for a future episode?
Share with us.
Yeah, tell us what you're doing. What are you doing today so you could be successful tomorrow? Send us an email at success@realestateoftomorrow.com.
And don't forget to leave us a review, an honest review.
Screw an honest review. Leave us a 5-star review. And for every 5-star review we get, we're going to send you a badass Real Estate Meme t-shirt.
Those shirts are hilarious.
See ya.